What if you could unlock the secrets to skyrocketing your website sales by simply choosing between two different versions? Welcome to the game-changing world of A/B testing. By the end of this video, you're going to learn how to interpret tests, how to set up tests, and how to take the top converting strategies that we use in our business to run hundreds and hundreds of tests and wildly increase conversion rates. So let's dive straight in. Now, you'll see on my screen, we have a nice little flow here that we run through every single week with our clients. So the first thing you want to do is when you're split testing, you want to decide what you want to split test. Now, how do you decide what you want to split test? Well, you look at number one, the heat maps on the page. Number two, the visitor recordings. Number three, you get any feedback from people, and what we call it like the grandma test, right? So if you get your mom, your grandma, like whoever to go through the page, someone who knows nothing about your business potentially, and have them see how they navigate the page, see what they notice, do the 5-second test with them as well, right? So the 5-second test is basically you say, right, you ready? I'm going to give you 5 seconds and you're going to tell me what this page is all about. So you open up the laptop and then they look at it and he closes the laptop and they go, right, tell me what you learned from that. Then you know how good your value proposition is on the page and how clearly that is suggested, right? So once you've got all that, then you're going to come up with something called a hypothesis, right? So you see a lot of that in science. This is kind of like science for marketing, right? So you come up with a hypothesis, which basically means you come up with an idea of what you want to test. So at this point, these are some of the things that you might test. And this is not a full extensive list, but it gives you a good starting point. So headlines, David Ogilvy said 70 cents of the dollar is spent in the headline, right? Pricing. Maybe you're going to try some alternative pricing, maybe a lower price, a higher price, a split pay price, right? Whatever the way you want to position that. Maybe you're going to put like best value on one of those if you've got 3 options on your page. The offer overall. What if you add bonuses in? What if you take away bonuses, right? How does that affect the conversion rates? Like we just did a weird test where we went, okay, we were selling a book on its own and giving that away, like free plus the shipping. Now, here's the crazy thing. We did that, and then we went, okay, well, let's put 3 or 4 bonuses to it. It converted lower. What? That's crazy, right? You think putting more bonuses, making the offer better, sometimes makes it better, but then it made it potentially unbelievable because it was the price didn't match everything that you got. Okay, so maybe that would convert it better if we then charge like $15 or whatever for the book, or $15 for the bonuses, and then give the book for free. Right? You can change the offer around and position it multiple different ways to see high conversion rates. Then the VSL, so this stands for video sales letter. So if you have a video at the top of your page that explains your offering, it's like basically the same kind of thing that's on the text version of the page, but in video format. Sometimes you might want to change the opening of the video sales letter. So, for example, if you are changing the opening in the first 60 seconds, you might see like you start off with 100% of people watching, but within the first 30 seconds, you're losing like 50-60% of those people. So if you're losing that many people, then you probably want to change your opening because you're not grabbing that person's attention. Next part, funnel structure. So what if you've got an opt-in part on the page? What if you brought that further up above the fold? What if maybe you made it lower on the page where maybe you get lesser opt-ins, but then you track back and you realize more people are consuming your sales message, which is then leading to higher conversion rates. Or you might go, I'm going to change, for example, form fields. So remove some of the form fields. And on the front, you might just go, I just want your email. I don't want anything else, just email, no name, no phone number, no anything else. Why? Because then we can remarket to those people and we can put them into our abandoned cart sequence. But without that, literally, once they leave the page, they're gone. They're finished. It's all disappeared. Right? So if you're not capturing those details, then potentially you're missing out on sales there. Okay, body copy, like what's happening in the main sales message, like when you look at your heat maps, and you can use different tools out there like Microsoft Clarity. You can use Hotjar. It will basically, when we say heat map, it shows you like dark red for the thing that everyone's seeing, and as it gets colder and colder in the color, that shows that less and less people are getting to that stage. So in your body copy, for example, if loads of people are dropping off after your introduction in your body copy, then probably you want to change that part of the messaging because it's not drawing people in with a good opening hook. Images on the page. So it's cool things you can do with the image side of things. A couple. Number one is like change the hero image. So the image that's above the fold, if you've got an image that's in the background, look at changing that, because doing like 4 different variations of it. So I saw a test on someone else's test that they did, and actually in that particular market, the difference between having an American flag on the back versus a woman that was holding the American flag actually converted significantly higher having the woman there, right? So if you don't test these things, you don't know what's working and what isn't. Then we've got form fields that we talked about, testimonials, like bringing the testimonials further up the page, adding more testimonials. Have you got written testimonials? Have you got video testimonials? Have you got screenshot testimonials? And then changing the backstory out, right? So that backstory can be changed in the video sales letter. So, like, what is your story? What is your unique journey that you've been on? What's your company's unique journey? How does that resonate with the person reading the page? The buttons, you can change the button color. You can change the text that's on the buttons. Now, all these things, some of these things, you might only do one variation of, and that's okay. But some of these things you might do 5 variations of. So, for example, the offer, you're probably not going to do 5 variations of an offer in one test. Why? Because there's too many complexities to it, fulfillment, and like how all those things change, and you won't get a good idea of exactly what's going on. So, the things where you can do the small tweaks, I recommend instead of doing just one variation, so you go, okay, we're going to test a green button versus a red button. We're going to test a green button, a red button, an orange button, a purple button. So as long as you've got enough traffic coming through, enough visitors coming to your site, then it's better to test multiple variations. Why? Because then you're going to get the results back quicker. Because here's what happens if you work with a lot of CRO agencies, or like you just see people do this internally. They test one thing against one other thing. And then what happens is by the time they've actually got the results back from that, they could have run 3 or 4 more tests. So there's a philosophy that Dan Sullivan teaches, who's the owner of Strategic Coach, covered really well in the book 10x is easier than 2x. Well, if you apply that kind of exponential thinking, it's not about actually just doing more, but it's about like if you can shorten the cycle there, right, and think differently about how you're testing rather than going, okay, we're going to set this test up and we want it to be at 99% statistical significance. So basically, if we tested this 99 times out of 100, the same outcome would happen. If you can go at slightly less on that, and yeah, you're not always going to get it perfect, but if you can go and test 5 more different tests in that period of time versus the other person that's going to test in one, like who's going to win? Because you literally just, like, if you throw more arrows at the board, the likelihood that you're going to win is a lot higher. So even if I went to be a professional darts player, and every time that darts player threw 3 darts, I was allowed to throw 20, I don't have to be that good a darts player to still win. Why? Because I'm getting more shots to throw at, right? So that's why when we look at here, we go, okay, choose one of these options and then choose 4 to 5 variations. Sometimes we'll do even more depending on the level of traffic. So what happens is then we do one test. We create the test on the Monday and we create for each stage of the funnel. So think of your opt-in page, thank you page, order page, OTO pages, right? Any page in the funnel. Now, what you can do with this as well, if you use the right split testing platforms, you can have it so it doesn't have cross-pollinated tests. So what that means is you're not muddying the water where someone has received a different opt-in page and a different thank you page and a different order page, right? Why? Because then otherwise you might think that your opt-in page is doing the heavy lifting there with the test that you're running, but it's actually the order page that is converting better. And it's just the fact that some of those visitors that went to that opt-in page variation has gone to that order page variation. So if you look at it in that respect, you have to segment off the traffic so to make sure it doesn't cross over with each other. So everyone's getting one test. So some people might be getting an order page test. Some people might be getting an opt-in page test. Some people might be getting a test on the one-time offer pages, the upsell pages. And so you segment all that off for the reasons that I suggested, right? And then on Tuesday, then you review the proposed test and we review the data from the previous week's test as well. Now, if the test is still running on that funnel step, then as it hit 95% statistical significance. Now, the most of the time, we want to be looking for 95%. So that means 95 times out of 100, essentially. It's a more complicated maths algorithm than that. But most software that you use will literally just tell you what that is. If you're not using software and you're just using like a landing page builder where you're doing a direct A/B test, then you can use something like Neil Patel's free calculator. And I will bring that up for you. A/B test. Right, so that looks like this. So on here, you can literally go, okay, I had 1,000 visitors to this version, and I had 90 conversions. I had 1,000 visitors to this version, and I had 120 conversions, or like whatever the numbers were for you. And you can see it says test B converted 34% better. So I'm 99% certain that the changes in test B will improve conversion rates. Your results are statistically significant. Now, if I change that to 100, now it's 78%. So it's not statistically significant. If we change it to 110, we're 94%. So it says it's questionable, right? If I do 112 and it says when we get to 95%, we are statistically significant. So you can also add more variance here, right? So you might go, okay, this got 222, right? So now it's like test C converted better. So you can test, put that numbers in there. This is already calculating all that stuff for you. So you don't need to be a maths whiz or anything to figure that stuff out. Okay. So at that point, we go, oh, is it statistically significant? If it is, and the previous test and declare the winner. And by the way, you don't have to wait until a Tuesday. Like, you really want to be looking at this every day. We just put this as a good cadence to look at just to make sure like we're double checking. Then you end the previous test and declare the winner, right? And then if not, you continue the test for another week, and then we launch the new tests on a Wednesday at the latest. Now, if there isn't a test running on that funnel step, then just launch the new test anyway, right? So you're going to, and then what happens is we launch the new test, and then we go back to the start, and then we start thinking about what tests are we going to run for the following week based off the data that we've already got, because it's probably going to be more than one hypothesis, one idea that you come up with that you want to use. Now, the other thing on here to note is this. So once a quarter, and sometimes you want to do this more than once a quarter, but I'd say at the very least once a quarter, you want to test improving consumption. So what does that mean? Well, if you're selling, whether you're selling a e-commerce product, whether you're selling a online course or coaching program or like any kind of service there, if people are not consuming your offer, right, they're not going to buy from you again. Why? Because they didn't get any value out of the thing. So it doesn't matter if the thing is the best thing since sliced bread. They're not going to go and buy the thing. They're not going to buy the next thing. So, for example, let's say you're selling a challenge or something like that. If you're doing like a 7-day challenge, it could be a weight loss challenge, it could be make money challenge, whatever, right? So you're doing a 7-day challenge, lose £10 in 7 days, right? That's for the weight loss, by the way, not the making money, because that's a bad offer for making money. You lose £10. So what you want to look at is how many people are consuming each day of the challenge. So how many people clicked on day 1? How many people clicked on day 2? How many people completed the actions for day 3, etc. And what you'll find is you'll see drop off each day of that challenge, right? And this happens the same if you're doing a webinar. This happens the same if you are selling a physical product. From an e-commerce perspective, is so how do you measure that if you've got a physical product? Well, have you got QR codes that they scan to read through the instructions of how to use the thing? Is a QR code that they scan on the outside of the package before they open it, right? Where it might have a sales letter in there, a video sales letter, and they just scan that and it goes through that, right? All those kind of things you can track and measure those. So anything that's got someone clicking, anything that you've got a digital footprint with, so essentially like you can see what's happened, then you want to be looking at least once per quarter to improve that level of consumption. Why? Because if people consume more, they buy more. Simple as that. Consume more, buy more. So that's what we want to look at there, right? And then we test that. We test those things. Now, how do we decide what wins and what doesn't? Well, we look at the rules of testing. Now, my rules of testing on here are going to be different from what most people would say from a conversion rate optimization standpoint. And the reason they are is because we apply philosophy of rapid testing, right? So we could go really, 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 really data backed and we say, hey, look, we need to run loads of conversions. We need to have it 99% statistical significance. If we're going to run 5 variations, we need to run them all to the end because we never know what might happen in the end. Here's the thing. Probably 80-90% of the time, and this is just from my own personal experience, is if something starts off rubbish, it ends off rubbish. So if you go and launch an ad, for example, and it starts off and the click-through rate is like 0.1%, the chances of that turning then into a 1% click-through rate is pretty damn low. You typically see the lead indicators of something that will convert at least similar to the control to start off with if it's going to end up being a breakout winner. Very, very rarely do you see something converting 25%, 30% lower than the control after 100 visitors. And when I say after 100 visitors, if you're looking at like sales and your sales rate right now is 1% conversion rate, so that means 1 out of 100 people are actually buying. If that's 1 out of 100, then and you see another version that you're like, well, that's had no sales, that's had 1 sale, you can't make a decision on that. It's just not enough. However, if you're getting 100 visitors to the page for a opt-in, right, for someone to put their details in, you got 100 visitors there and you've got your control, maybe you're at a 30% opt-in rate, so you've had 30 people opt into that 100 visitors, right? But then you've got a variation that you've only had 2 people opt in. Now, what's the chances of that actually beating the control? Right? It's very, very, very unlikely. So what we do is we switch off the losers early. And this is why we start with 5 or sometimes even 10 variants, because we start early. We give it the best chance of winning. So rather than just going A or B, we go, right. And here's the thing, a lot of the time, like variation number 7 or sometimes variation number 10 is the one that wins. Because once we go past the normality of what we think would work, then we get to the next stage where we actually go, I'm just going to go outside the box. And quite often the outside the box ideas work, right? So then we followed that same process all the way down. So if it converts 20% lower after 100 visitors per variant, switch it off. Again, this has to be, when we say visitors, it's kind of like really you need at least like 10 conversions on each one of these. So, and then check that after every 100 visitors after, start cutting those losers early on. And then what you'll find is probably after about 500 to 1,000 visitors, you might end up with like 2 or 3 variations that are kind of neck and neck, right? So you might have your control that's working okay, and then you've got one variation that's at like maybe 20-30% above the control, and you got one variation that is quite a bit lower. Well, maybe it's almost neck and neck with the control, but so you're like, I don't want to switch it off because maybe it's going to come out, right? So that's what you end up with left. And then to declare the variation as a winner, it should have at least 95% statistical significance. If after 1 week of variation isn't at least 85%. Now, what we look at here is you've got to make sure you're driving in enough visitors and traffic here. So you're going to do less variations if you've got a small amount of visitors going to your site. If you've got a high number, you can get that number back quicker. So if we're not at 85%, if it's like, marginal gains, in my opinion, what I do is I'd rather go, okay, let's just get a new test and look for bigger gains, bigger wins. Because although this is a game of 1%, if it takes you 12 months to run 12 tests, you're only going to increase by those 1% compounded, right? So it's actually a little bit more than 12%. Like it's 1% of the 1% of the 1%. So it keeps going up, right? However, if after a week or so and you're like, okay, this is pretty much, they're just neck and neck, they're not really doing anything, then just switch it off and start again. Just have another go, have another go, have another go. And this is why we get such great results, is because we test so rapidly, right? So if after 2 weeks you're not hitting 90% statistical significance, declare the control the winner, move on. Declare it as inconclusive, carry on. If after 3 weeks you're not at 95%, then declare the control the winner, right? So at that point, you're never going to be running a test really longer than 3 weeks. And again, depending on how many visitors you've got, this works really, really well, by the way, if you've got a bunch of visitors and traffic coming through, right? If you've got a tiny amount, then just the difference between the way that you run it, if you're just starting out, so if you're a 5-figure, 6-figure kind of level, then if you're running a small amount of traffic, what you would do is allocate probably 80 to 90%, sometimes 100% of the traffic. If you're like me with my own stuff, I just go all in straight out the gate. Why? Because I just want to get the results and data back faster. If I'm doing this for clients, a lot more conservative. Why? Because it's their money, not my own, right? So I can be a little bit more risky, and I'm going to be a bit more risk averse with clients' money. So, for example, to start off with, we might start off like this, right? So, like day number 1. So day 1, you do 10% allocation. Okay. We'll just make that a jazzy color. Okay. So day 1, 10% allocation. And then after maybe day 2 or let's say we get to day 3 and we go, the variation's working well. Okay. Let's up the level of risk a little bit, but we're actually, we know it's converting at the moment. So we go to 20%. And then we get to day 5. Maybe even by day 4, we're like, actually, we upped it and it's still working. So then we go to 40% allocation. Right? And when we say 40% allocation, that means we're putting 40% of the traffic that's going to that page into the test. So that doesn't mean we're sending 40% to the variation. That means we want to do equal distribution between all the variations. So if we've got the control, so you might have the control and then 2 variations. And when we say control, by the way, that just means like the original version. So you get the original version and maybe 2 variations. So you can do 33% split between each one of those, right? But that means technically if you looked at then, let's say we get to day 5 and we've got 50%, right? We got 50% allocation here, okay? So at 50% allocation, what we would do is if you look at that and say, okay, we've got, and I'm going to give you a little bit more here. So let's say we just got original. I'll just make that a different color. That's a silly color. So we've got the original and we've got variation. So if you were doing 100% traffic allocation, that would mean you got 50% would end up going there and 50% would end up going to the variation, right? However, if you're only including 50% of the total traffic visitors allocation in there, what you're actually getting is 75% are still going to the original and 25% are going to the variation, right? I think that math is correct. So don't judge me on that. However, that's the process there, right? So even though it looks like it's 50-50 in the test, you've only got 50% of the traffic in the test, right? So 50% of your traffic is still going towards the original, okay? So this is how you reduce the risk down, because you just start off with 10% allocation, you bring it up to 50% allocation. If it's still performing then maybe by day 7, you're like, okay, we're gonna go up to like 80% of the traffic now, right? If that still works, we're running out of space here. If that still works, we get to day 8 and we go, okay, we're gonna go 100%, right? So you can see how we're kind of going through this process of, instead of just going, okay, all in on day 1, we're guiding it through the process, and then if something's not working, we just switch it off, right? Simple as that. Just one click. So the risk is very, very low in order to get the outcome. And this is how we set up testing processes in order to get the highest conversion rates. So just to recap, how do you set up one of these tests? Well, use a testing tool. Either you can go and use one of the landing page builders. So if you use like a ClickFunnels or a Go High Level or Unbounce or whatever you use, or HubSpot even, then like look at using any A/B test builders that they've got. I'm not sure if HubSpot has got one actually internally. But then if you want to get more complex, then you can use something like convert.com, which is what we use. And that was recommended when Google Optimize was no longer with us anymore. Google basically went, hey guys, this is what we recommend. We recommend you go over to use convert.com. We started using it. It's actually really, really good. And it's not cheap. $500 a month if you want to use it. I can drop a link in the description. You get a 30-day trial for free. So here's the thing. Think about it this way. Well, how many tests could I run in the first 30 days to get that to pay for itself? And that is the magic of it all, right? So start running some tests like this week. If you've watched this video and you're like, do you know what? I think this is great. I want to do it, but I don't either have the skill set, the time, or I just want to get an expert in to do it, then just drop us a message, drop a comment around this video or whatever, or email us, and we'd be happy to do it for you and set this process up, right? Why? Because it works super, 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 super well, and everyone makes a whole bunch of profit together. So let me know if you have any questions on it. Drop your question in the comments. If you like this video and you're watching on YouTube, just hit that subscribe button and get more videos that go into depth and detail like this. And happy to help. Have a great day.